Welcome back, everybody. Today we are talking vanilla fragrances. If you're interested to know what vanilla fragrances can get the attention of a non-vanilla lover, then keep watching. So I have quite a few fragrances to talk about today, more than I thought I would actually, and I have broken them down into categories. Everything will be timestamped in the description box as always, so feel free to skip forward or back depending on what your interests are. I'm going to start with the ones that I consider to be more gourmand leaning. First up is one that I have definitely spoken about many times before. This is Orchidée Vanille by Van Cleef & Arpels. This is what I would consider to be a fairly straight up vanilla with a little bit of orange rind or orange oil in the opening. It leans a little bit on the darker side. I wouldn't say it's the darkest vanilla I've ever smelled. So I would say it's probably mid-range. It's not super, light ice cream vanilla, but it's also not extremely dark and resinous either. It's somewhere in the middle. And as I said, I find this to be a fairly straight up vanilla. The opening has a little bit of that spicy orange rind bent to it, but then that eventually dies down and you're left with a fairly moderate weight vanilla fragrance. It's very pleasant. I really enjoy wearing this to bed. I wouldn't say it's my favorite vanilla that's in my wardrobe. I certainly used to appreciate it a lot more than I currently am, but it's still a worthy mention, and there's no denying that it is a very popular vanilla in the fragrance community, and for good reason. Next up, we have one that was gifted to me by the brand. I have to admit, I didn't really think I was going to be overjoyed with this fragrance given my understanding of the note profile, but I ended up really enjoying it, and in fact, it ended up being my favorite of the fragrances that they sent me. So this is Exotic by Orientica. It's from their Art Bellissimo line. This one is a really intoxicating, spicy sandalwood and vanilla fragrance. I consider this to be primarily a vanilla fragrance, but you do get that sandalwood, which is lovely and soft and a little bit dry, and there's also some spices in there too, which also adds to that dryness. It's not a super dry perfume overall, but it is just a really lovely blend of dry spices, dry sort of creamy sandalwood, and a really sweet or gourmand vanilla. And then the third one in this category is one that I have spoken about quite a bit. This is Love Tuberose by Amouage. This is just a tester bottle that I bought secondhand, and this was a surprise love for me because I did try this quite a few years ago and thought, nope, that's just way too sweet for me, not my style of perfume at all. Even though I have always been a rather big lover of tuberose, it was always the vanilla in here, or the cream. I think it's is it a chantilly cream note, or it's a vanilla cream note that's in here, which gives it the sweetness and the gourmand aspect. And I always just thought it was too sweet and too creamy and too dessert-like. It doesn't smell like cake, but it does smell creamy, like I want to say like a panna cotta kind of dessert, that creamy, sweet, custardy dessert with a lot of white florals in there as well. Tuberose I get a lot of. I think I also detect gardenia, and there's probably jasmine in here as well. I think it really just has the whole gamut of white florals. It's a white floral bomb, but it does have a slight gourmand bent to it, and it definitely leans on the vanillic end of the spectrum. I am just turning the lights down a little bit because I feel like the bottles are just getting too blown out for you to see. So hopefully that's still okay lighting wise. So they were the gourmand heavy fragrances that have a strong vanilla bent to them. The last one, the Amouage, could also easily have fit into the next category as well, which I'm categorizing as my floral vanilla fragrances. First up, we have Ylang Ylang Nosy Bee by Paris Monte Carlo. This one obviously has quite a hefty dose of Ylang Ylang in there. But to me, when I first smelled this fragrance, I didn't really think of it as an Ylang Ylang fragrance. I considered it to be more of a vanilla fragrance with ylang ylang in there. It does have a lot of body. It's quite a solar fragrance, obviously probably influenced by the ylang ylang that's in there. But to me, there is a really prominent vanilla aspect to this fragrance, and it just adds to that beautiful creaminess that ylang ylang typically has, and also obviously imparts some sweetness as well. Admittedly, I don't really wear this one out very much. I tend to enjoy wearing this one at home because I find it very cozy and comforting in a beachy sort of way. It doesn't smell like suntan lotion, but it does definitely remind me of a beachy tropical destination. The irony being, of course, that I probably wouldn't wear this in a beachy tropical destination because it does have so much vanilla in it and it's very creamy, and I think it would probably become a little bit cloying in the heat. But I love it anyway. That is Ylang Ylang Nosy Bee by Paris Monte Carlo. Next up, we have Delina Exclusive by Parfums de Marly. This one, I'm sure you are all familiar with. It's a rose fragrance that has a bit of oud in here to give it a bit of darkness and depth. I don't know if it's real oud or if it's a synthetic oud. I suspect it's probably synthetic oud. It doesn't come off to me as oud though. You know, when I think about other oud rose fragrances in my collection, this smells quite different to that. I'd really just get a woodiness effectively, but coupled with a very noticeable vanilla note, which again just gives it a lot of body, a lot of creaminess and added sweetness. This perfume has a lot of presence to it. I have worn this out a couple of times, but again, I tend to reserve this one for being at home, or at least if I'm going out, then I'm really just around friends and family, and it's sort of a cozy situation. Having said that, this does have quite an elevated feel to it, so you probably could wear it out in a formal setting. However, this is a fragrance that it just doesn't really feel like me, but I love the scent of it. So I wear it for myself, but I don't feel like it's something that I necessarily want to be wearing in public necessarily. Anyway, so that is Delina Exclusive. The next one is one that I only have a sample of at this point. This is another Paris Monte Carlo. This is Vanille de Tahiti. I have real trouble saying that. This one, when it dries down, feels like more of a straight up vanilla to me than any of the other fragrances on this list. It does have some white and yellow florals in here, and I don't know what else it has in here, but to me it opens a little bit green and quite earthy. I would say that the tuberose or the gardenia in here leans perhaps a little bit on the indolic side. I wouldn't say it's straight up dirty, but I have seen comments of other people who have tried this saying that they feel like the opening is very dirty on them. It's not like that on me. I mostly just get greenness and a slight bit of earthiness, and I definitely get the solar aspect of those white and yellow florals that are in here. But when it dries down, it really, to me, comes across as mostly just a very fluffy, soft, straight up vanilla. And I find it quite enjoyable. I just don't know whether I'm going to, I haven't decided yet whether or not I'm going to upgrade to a full bottle. I don't think I really need one, because even though I enjoy this fragrance, I don't know if it's just too much vanilla for me, and I'm not likely to get the use out of it, particularly as I have Ylang Ylang Nosy Bee and love tuberose, which are white floral, yellow floral, vanilla fragrances. So I feel like this one might be a little bit superfluous to requirements. I would be curious to try the extrait version of this. I hear that that is a little bit deeper, has a little bit more body, and perhaps is a little bit more on the resinous side. So I would be interested to try that. But for the moment, I am very much enjoying this sample, but again, I'm not sure if a full bottle is worth it for me, given that I'm not typically a straight up vanilla lover. The next category of vanilla fragrances that I want to talk to you about are leathery vanillas. The first one that I'm going to mention is Absolute Aphrodisiac by Initio Parfums. This one was a bit of a surprise love because it is so very, very sweet. I feel like I get some similarities between this and Arnie by Nichane. Arnie is a lot spicier and has that really gorgeous ginger note in there, which I really, really love. But there's just something about those two fragrances that remind me of each other. So I don't feel like I need to own both, or I don't know if I could justify both, even though I would love to have a bottle of Arnie to spritz on whenever I feel like it. But this one has castoreum in it, which comes off a little bit leathery. But because this is so sweet and ambery up top, I feel like that masks some of the leatheriness. But once I started to detect the leatheriness in here, I couldn't unsmell it. And it is actually a really pleasant wear. Because the leather is not too leathery. Although I have heard comments where people have said that they found this to be quite animalic. I don't get that at all. I get a really lovely, sweet vanilla in the opening that's darkened a little bit by what I would think is an ambery accord, which sits on top of a leathery sort of base. And it's very addictive, very pleasant to wear. I always get Matt commenting on this one when I wear it because he likes the sweet ones, and so he always comments on this one. But that was Absolute Aphrodisiac by Initio Parfums. Next up is a bottle that looks like it's brand new, but it's not. It's just that I also have a travel size of this. But I saw this come up for a fantastic price on clearance, so I decided to grab it even though I didn't really need it. And it's probably very arguable that I don't need a bottle of this size. And it was just such a good price. I couldn't resist it when it came up for sale a couple of years ago. So I was a little bit preemptive in getting this bottle before finishing my travel size, but I'm sure I will get to it eventually. This is Vanille D'Iris by Gourmand. It is a massive 120 ml bottle. So the interesting thing about this one is that obviously by the name you would think it's an irisy vanilla, and it is. There is definitely iris in here. But whether it's the iris or the orris root, I should say probably, whether it's the orris root that comes off leathery in this fragrance or whether there's something else that is contributing to a leathery sort of accord, I don't know, but it definitely smells leathery to me. It smells like a suede vanilla fragrance. The vanilla in here is not sweet, and I actually wonder if maybe the vanilla itself is leaning a little bit leathery because it's not that sweet sort of cooking vanilla. It's more of a, I don't know, maybe a vanilla pod before you've added sugar and baking goods to it. I'm not sure, but it is an absolutely stunning fragrance, and like all Gourmand fragrances, just smells so elegant. And the travel size of this that I wear, I tend to wear when I'm traveling for work because I consider this to be such a fantastic office-friendly fragrance. Anyway, that is Vanille D'Iris by Gourmand. And the third fragrance in this category is Cuir Beluga by Guerlain. This one, like the Vanille de Tahiti, to me feels a little bit more straight up vanilla. There is a suede base in here, but the vanilla in here is very vanilla. It's Guerlain's Vanilla Accord. It's beautiful. It's very creamy and sweet, but not sugary sweet. It is a very elegant Vanilla Accord that's in here, made even more elegant by the presence of a suede accord as well. I have to say though, as well done as this is, it is not my favorite vanilla. And you will probably also notice that Spiritueuse Double Vanille does not appear in this list. And that is because I sold the bottle that I had because I just wasn't wearing it. I just didn't find it to be something that I gravitated towards. It's not something that I considered to be super interesting to wear. And this is sort of falling into that category for me. But having said that, this is a very elegant suede vanilla. And if you get along with the Guerlain Vanilla Accord, then you probably will enjoy this. I like the Guerlain Vanilla Accord, but I like it when it's coupled with something that just draws a little bit more interest for me. I need something more than just vanilla, even if the vanilla itself is very well done, which this is. So that is a Cuir Beluga by Guerlain. Next up, I have a single perfume in its own category. This is a green vanilla fragrance, and you've probably just guessed what the fragrance is. This is Angelique Noir by Guerlain. I really like this fragrance. I love the opening more than perhaps the dry down, because the dry down to me is, again, maybe just a little bit too much plain vanilla. But the opening, which is green with that angelica note in here, I don't know if there's galbanum in here as well, maybe to make it even more green, because there is greenness in here, and it's quite tangy. It's a tangy greenness that is in the opening to me, which just gives this vanilla a real sparkle. And you don't often get sparkle with vanilla, you know. Vanilla is usually creamy or cakey or, you know, gourmand or resinous, but you don't generally get sparkle, but I do get sparkle with this one. And I don't get aldehydes from this, but it's that same sparkle that you sometimes can get from aldehydes without the aldehyde smell, if that makes any sense. So yeah, this is quite a unique, I think this is quite a unique vanilla in the opening, but when it dries down, it just becomes vanilla. It's a very vanilla. And so for me, I really enjoy the opening for this, but usually once it gets to the dry down, I'm ready to put something else on over the top, because I just want to make it a little bit more interesting. Anyway, a worthy mention, and definitely worthy of being in my wardrobe. That's Angelique Noir. All right, we have come to the final category, which is probably my favorite category, and this is resinous Ambery vanilla fragrances. First up, and probably the most important fragrance on this list, because I feel like this was my gateway into appreciating vanilla in fragrances. This is Vanille Tonka by Parfums de Nicolai. Now this one is really hard to describe, and when I first smelled this, I was thinking, that's not very sweet at all. And in fact, when other people smell this for the first time, and particularly other people who enjoy vanilla fragrances, they also go, that's not very sweet. But now that I have worn this a lot, I actually do find this to be quite sweet. It's not sugary sweet, but there is definitely sweetness in here. This is so interesting. It's very spicy. It's a little bit peppery in the opening. And even just smelling it from the nozzle, I feel like I get a bit of a pepperiness. I also get an aromaticness to this as well in the opening. It's not aromatic like lavender, but I sort of get something maybe a little bit herbal to this. Mostly what I think I get with this fragrance is there is some orange flower in here, which I definitely feel like I pick up, which I think also is what is contributing to the sweetness. And then I also feel like I get lots of resinous incense in here. It is of course a little bit powdery, which I think I get from the tonka, but I don't know if it's, even though the name says Vanille Tonka, I don't personally feel like I get lots of tonka. I detect some tonka. I feel like this is more of a ambery resinous vanilla with some tonka, rather than a vanilla tonka fragrance with some ambery nuances to it. So this is probably my favorite vanilla in my wardrobe. And I only have this tiny little bottle of it, and I wear it so sparingly, even though I can still get it and I can replace this when it runs out. But it's just, I guess, the hassle of having to order from overseas. This little bottle sits on a pedestal within my wardrobe in terms of the vanilla fragrances. And I'm very grateful to it, because it has broadened my perspective on vanilla in perfumery. So that is Vanille Tonka by Parfums de Nicolai. Next up, we have Encens Suave. I only have this little 6ml bottle of it. I think these are so cute, and I love how the brand did these in the same style as the bigger bottles. I guess you could call it a mini, really, but it's just so great that these are available, because it allows you to try lots of things from the brand, really get a good understanding of a fragrance before you decide to wear it. And I particularly love the fact that even though it is a mini, it has an atomizer on it. Anyway, I picked this up in 2020, which I think might have been the year that the brand launched, or at the very least it was when they became available in Australia, and there was a little bit of a flurry of activity at the perfumery. They had some master classes and all that sort of stuff. So it was a little bit of a moment when this became available. This is one that when I first sampled the line, this was my favorite from the line immediately, and what I really love about this one is the beautiful resinous frankincense opening. I don't necessarily get smokiness from the incense in this. I get mostly resinous incense. It does smell a little bit churchy in the opening. It specifically reminds me of some of the churches that I visited when we were going through Spain, particularly as we were going there at Easter time, so there was all these festivities around Easter, and it definitely reminds me of that smell. Actually, there is a little bit of a smokiness coming through, but it's not super smoky. It's not the same smokiness that you get from burning an incense stick, where it is very smoky. This is more like you're warming up the resin and it's volatilizing, and you're getting a hint of smokiness, but it doesn't smell like it's burning necessarily. There is woodiness in here as well, maybe a touch of leatheriness, but mostly what I get is that resinous frankincense with a hint of smokiness plus a really lovely vanilla. And as it dries down, you just get more and more and more of that sweet vanilla coming out. It's not sugary, but there definitely is a sweetness to it because I think that vanilla is largely tied up in an amber accord. It is really stunning. I thoroughly enjoy wearing this fragrance, and I'm really happy to learn that they have now launched 50ml bottles instead of just their 100ml bottles. So perhaps eventually one day I will upgrade to a 50ml, or maybe I'll just buy another 6ml, because it has taken me a couple of years to even get through this and I still haven't finished it. It is quite a strong fragrance, and I find it wears very well on me. I get really good longevity out of it. But anyway, that is Encens Suave by Matière Première. Next up is a new one to my collection, but not new to me. I have smelled this before, and I actually reviewed a few fragrances from this house, I think back in 2021, and this was one of the ones that I reviewed. This is Wish Come True by Stefan Umber-Luca. Now this is one I just added to my collection last week. I bought it off a friend who is local. She posted it in one of the Facebook groups, and I thought, I'm going to take that because it has been on my little watch list for a while. I wasn't sure if I wanted a full bottle of it, but I definitely have been interested. This was between Panthea Iris and this. They were the two from that original sampling session that I did with this house that I really, really enjoyed. So this one is really interesting. There is a lot going on in this fragrance, and I'm still, even now, trying to figure it out. In the opening, I get quite a lot of resins. Again, I think I get quite a lot of frankincense in the resin form, not the smoky form, but there is smokiness here. There is also a little bit of leatheriness, and I also get some zingy citrus as well, which just gives it a bit of brightness and also a little bit of sweetness. It's a really interesting combination. After a few minutes, the resinous sort of aspect of that frankincense starts to get more smoky, and I feel like I maybe even get some leathery nuances coming through. I also kind of get a bit of booziness, but there's no sort of boozy notes necessarily in here. I think it's just the way all of these different notes, which are very different from each other, how they all interact and become what they become. Yeah, you end up with this sort of boozy leaning, bright, but also resinous and smoky sort of vanilla. And the sweetness from the vanilla is there from start to finish, and you get the vanilla. The vanilla is a very vanilla. You can definitely detect it, but it's just made really interesting by all these other things that are sort of happening around it. It's very powdery as well, and there's like a whimsical aspect to this that I just can't quite put my finger on. I don't know how to describe it. I don't know where it's coming from. And when it dries down, after a couple of hours, I find it to be quite floral. So you get these floral aspects that come through together, mingling with this resinous, smoky vanilla. and they bring with them a very soapy aspect, which again is just, it's kind of a little bit like a dog's breakfast of all these different elements that are coming together. But somehow, even though as I describe them, I'm going, that sounds terrible, it's really not. It's so interesting, but they all work together in harmony and to create this beautiful, really interesting take on vanilla. I think this might be the most interesting vanilla fragrance that I have in my wardrobe. Or maybe it's just because it's the new thing and I'm really fascinated with it because it's new in my wardrobe. Yeah, I don't know. It's a very interesting vanilla fragrance, and I'm really glad to have picked up this bottle because I've been able to give it really good wears and really start to get some more aspects of it that I maybe hadn't picked up when I was sampling it a couple of years ago. So anyway, that is Wish Come True by Stefan Umberluca. I really hope I'm saying his name correctly. Next up is one that is also fairly new to my collection, definitely was purchased this year, purchased secondhand at a discount, but still was, you know, not as much of a discount as I normally would get on a secondhand bottle, because this one doesn't come up for sale very often at the moment. I think people are still too enamored with it. This is Material by Amouage. Yeah, this one took me a while, actually. This was not an instant love for me, because when I first smelled this one, I was in the perfumery. She spritzed it on a blotter, and both myself and my friend Coz were in the perfumery, and we both sniffed it and we both went, that just smells like paper, because on paper it doesn't really smell like much. And it's not until you put it on skin that this sort of really starts to open up. Also, I think because we were in the perfumery that day, and I think there was quite a few people in there, there was lots of stuff being spritzed around. Just the nature of this particular fragrance, I feel like when there's lots of other stuff around you, it's kind of hard to detect, because it feels more like a base kind of fragrance rather than having sort of really loud top notes that you can detect very easily. So it definitely sits kind of, for me, I feel like it sits closer to the skin, but I feel like when I do warm up, when it warms up on my skin, I can definitely sort of get this little scent bubble around me, but I don't feel like it's overpowering or obnoxious at all in any way. So this one definitely sits in the more resinous category of vanilla. That incense, those resins that are in here are very resinous. They're not, the incense is not smoky, it doesn't feel like it's being burnt, although I think during the mid and dry down I get a little bit of a hint of smokiness, but in the opening it just feels like you're getting that really balsamic resinous element. Obviously there are other resins in here as well. There's benzoin in here, which definitely gives you a spicy sweetness in addition to the vanilla that's in here. The vanilla is not the really sweet, ice creamy, cooking vanilla. It feels like that very natural vanilla, and I think that is a common thread for anyone who talks about this fragrance, is that they don't describe it as being a very sweet, gourmand, dessert-like vanilla. It also maybe sits a little bit on the leathery side of the spectrum, but I wouldn't necessarily say that it's a leathery fragrance. I also get a little bit of woodiness from here as well, which also imparts quite a dark, brooding sort of mood to this fragrance, and I love it. I think it's fantastic. It's not something that I can wear all the time, so having almost a full bottle of this is probably overkill for me. I really, really wish this came in smaller bottles, but then again, this was the bottle that came up for sale secondhand, so I grabbed it. Definitely not something that I can wear all the time, but when I do wear it, I feel amazing, but I do have to be in the mood for it. And I feel like this is a good one to try if you're wanting to try and find a vanilla fragrance that works for you, but you don't enjoy those really gourmand dessert-like vanillas. This one or Vanille Tonka are ones worthy of checking out for that reason. Next up is a Shalimar. It's not the original Shalimar, although I was tempted to put the original Shalimar on the list. But for the purposes of this list being vanilla-centric, I decided to use Shalimar Vanilla Planifolia. So as you would imagine, this is a flanker of Shalimar that has the vanilla aspect amped up. In fact, the vanilla is so much in here that I struggle actually to wear this particular one. When I first sampled it, I thought, wow, this smells amazing, I really like it. But when I got the bottle and I started wearing it, I just felt like, again, it gets a little bit too much for me. And especially once I get past that opening, which isn't as citrusy as the original Shalimar is, but the opening of this fragrance is the most like Shalimar as it ever is in the course of the wear. So as it dries down, you just get more and more and more vanilla, and I find that it just gets to be a little bit too much vanilla for me, and after a few hours I'm a little bit over it. It has fantastic staying power, so it lasts a really long time, which again is probably a reason why I struggle, because it's just too much vanilla, and so I really feel like I need more. I need something a little bit more interesting to couple with this. I really enjoy the opening, so sometimes I just put the fragrance on and then wear it for a couple of hours and then spritz something over the top to try and bring a little bit more interest to the vanilla base. Usually something woody I like to spray over the top of this. Anyway, so that is Shalimar Vanilla Planifolia. I could not do a vanilla list without featuring some kind of Shalimar, and I just thought this was the most appropriate one, even though this isn't my favorite from the Shalimar line, but certainly it is the one that showcases vanilla the most. This one is actually discontinued. It was a limited edition, but any of the Shalimars could be on this list because they're all effectively vanilla amber fragrances. The last one on this list I only have as a sample, Baby Cat by YSL. I do like this. I like it a lot, but there are reasons as to why I may never end up getting a full bottle of it. I don't know if I need a full bottle of it. This is quite a powerhouse fragrance, so perhaps a decant is all I'm ever going to need. And I do know somebody locally who owns this fragrance, so likely they will be happy to sell me a decant if I so wish. So this one is a very spicy vanilla fragrance. I feel like I also get incense in here, but what this smells like to me is, you know those stores where they maybe stock a lot of Moroccan and Indian trinkets, and they are often burning incense in the store. And what this smells like to me, what this really reminds me of, is you go into one of these stores, they've got all these sort of trinkets, and they might have reams of fabric as well that they're selling. They might have lots of different like smelly goods, you know, they might have some skincare things and maybe a couple of, you know, essential oils and perfumes and things. Like, it's just one of those stores that has all of these different things, and usually from kind of exotic locations, and they're burning the incense in the store, and you go and you start having a look through the fabrics that they have on a shelf or some clothing or something, but the fabric itself has started to absorb the other smells that are in the store, and so you end up with this really lovely fuzzy kind of smoky scent, incensey smell embedded in the fabric. And that is what this reminds me of. It's that really fuzzy memory of an incense and some spices, you know, the memory of a different life that this fabric has had prior to meeting you, and it's absorbed all of these things, and you couple that with some vanilla. That's what this reminds me of. It is extremely cozy, it's very lovely. I know this has been hyped to the max, so what I do want to say is, even though I'm speaking so animatedly about it right now, I have to say that this is a scent that felt very familiar to me. And I think that maybe is why people like it, is because it actually, even though it doesn't smell like any other vanilla perfume that I've smelled, and I haven't tried the Vanagloria by Laboratorio Olfativo, but it doesn't smell like any other perfume that I've smelled, but it's a smell that I have smelled before, and it smells very familiar. And personally, well, I don't know about, I can't speak for anyone else, but that is why I like it. It reminds me of certain things and a certain time in my life, and I find it very comforting. Is it worth the price tag? Only you can decide that, but I can tell you that the price that this is currently going for in Australia, I can't justify it, but I do really like it. And if I can get a decant, then I'll get a decant, but I'm not spending 500 Australian dollars on a bottle of this. Not when I have the beautiful fragrances that I have just talked about in this list today. You know, I really have some spectacular vanilla-centric fragrances here, and even though none of them smell exactly like this, I feel like there's definitely some fragrances in my wardrobe that are just as cozy, just as inviting, and just as interesting as Baby Cat. If you liked this, please do give it a thumbs up and let me know down below, based on the fragrances that I have talked about in this list today, let me know if you have suggestions for any other vanillas that you think I would appreciate. Not that I'm in the market to add any more bottles to my wardrobe, but of course I'm always curious to smell new things. So let me know if you think that there is something that I should check out. Thank you so much for joining me and for all of your support, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Bye.